So we know that Bill Gates must like the Chinese so much, it has to be a Marxist. And of course, a billionaire Marxist. We have a lot of those around, you know, like George Soros and others. And in Venezuela, they're all billionaires and they're all communists. And in Cuba, the generals and Raúl Castro and Fidel Castro, when he was alive, he was the seventh richest man in the world. And of course, they were communists too. So,
Yes.
but yeah, but Fauci is a very dangerous person. And I hope that when Donald Trump says he's going to keep the task force and he's going to be free to select different people, I hope he gets rid of Fauci, because he is a traitor and he's undermining the Trump administration. For example, the Five Eyes, those are the intelligence agencies of the United States, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, to sign for Common Core. And in Florida, we did, and most of the states did that because we needed that money to operate our schools. So Bill Gates was pushing the communist Common Core, and now he's going to introduce communism in the New York public schools with Cuomo, responsible, by the way, has a lot of blood in his hands because he allowed the people with the virus to go back to the nursing homes, and 25% of the deaths in New York City were in those nursing homes because of the negligence or maybe the intentional killing of older people by Governor Cuomo. But anyway, but people are not aware that all of our unions who used to be anti-communist, the AFL-CIO, when George Meany was in charge of the AFL-CIO, was an anti-communist union who would train people throughout the world to fight communists in other countries that communists had infiltrated unions in other countries. Well, today, the AFL-CIO has Trumka, who is a communist. They got rid of all the anti-communists in the AFL-CIO. Then you have the Service Employee International Union. The entire union is communist, and they control the nurses, the janitors throughout the United States. It's a very powerful union who gave millions of dollars to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. So when you have all of the main unions in the United States that do control the Democratic Party, there are only about 20,000 people that says that they're communists. You know, in the Communist Party USA, about 20,000 people. But those 20,000 people control the unions that control the Democratic Party. So then you have the press. More and more, the press is controlled by Marxists as well. The Democratic Party uses the mainstream press as a branch of the Democratic Party. So they give us fake news. This is why so many people of goodwill that only watch CNN, read the New York Times, which is the voice of the Council of Foreign Affairs, and of the Democratic Party, or they read the Washington Post, or here the Miami Herald, right here in Miami. When you read it, you get sick of what you read there, the lies against the president, constant lies. So if you are a well-meaning American, you watch CNN, MSNBC, you read the Miami Herald here, or you read another newspaper controlled by Marxists, you have to think that we have a monster in the White House by the name of Donald Trump, who we need to get rid of him because he's a danger to our nation and the world. That's what they read. That's what they've been hearing for 3.5 years, every day. Remember, Hitler had a minister of propaganda who said, when you repeat a lie constantly, people began to accept the lie as the truth. And that's what's been happening here. And then on top of that, you have our colleges full of Marxists, our high schools. I know, I was a social studies teacher with few exceptions. And when I was teaching years ago, it was not so bad as it is now. I'm going to tell you a story here. When I was teaching government and economics in the 1970s, right here in Miami, this was the book that I was using. Democracy and Communism, Theory and Action. I still have the book, an excellent book. Florida mandated that in every government class in the state of Florida, you had to teach what communism was all about and compare that with the United States. It's a wonderful book. I still have it right here. Unfortunately, that mandate disappeared. So now we're graduating students that have leftist professors, particularly in the social sciences, in social studies, in government, in US history, and what they're reading is a distorted history of the United States. We have another Marxist, communist, anarchist that wrote a book called, I don't know if you can see it, Howard Zinn. Can you see it? A People's History of the United States. This book sold 2 million copies in Amazon. When I went to FIU to teach social studies, a Cuban professor who was a Marxist told me, use this book for your social methods classes. And this is a book written by a communist who also was an anarchist and who has a distorted history of the United States. Worse than that, the college boards, which I have visited in Princeton, New Jersey, the person in charge of the college boards wrote the English version of Common Core. He's a Marxist, he's a communist. He wrote and his friend wrote the math version of Common Core that even I cannot help my grandson with that Common Core math. And I took calculus in college, analytical geometry, many courses in algebra, because they want to make our students dumb and dumber with that math curriculum. But anyway, so this is what I was taught at FIU to use it for my classes. And then this man did a book for middle school as well. And before he died, this man is dead, Howard Zinn. He was even the assistant to a communist who had the General Assembly of the United Nations, who was the foreign minister of Nicaragua, a Maryknoll priest by the name of Miguel de Escoto. He hired Howard Zinn as his assistant when he was the president of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Well, this book and lessons on this book are being used right here in Miami, in the public school system of Miami. In many of our high schools and middle schools, they're using that because this is what they were being teaching them in college by liberal, radical, leftist professors. So that's why we're in danger. Our students are being brainwashed, not only in colleges and universities, but in high schools and middle schools as well. And even the elementary schools. We also have another scandal, which I mentioned to our governor, our great governor that we have in Florida, Ron DeSantis, a very good friend of President Trump. Met with him at the Bay of Pigs Museum. He's from the area of Daytona, Florida. And I mentioned that in Daytona, they adopted a book, a world history book, done by a major publisher, Prentice Hall, that was written by the part on Islam, was written by a Muslim Brotherhood operative. And it's a distorted version of Islam. They say jihad is not what it is. Jihad is simply defending your religion. It's not killing the infidels, which that's what it says in the Quran. The infidel, you kill them or you enslave them. If you abandon Islam, you have to kill them. You abandon your religion. None of that is taught in that world history textbook adopted in Florida. Thank God we didn't adopt that in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, but they did adopt it in the Daytona area. And of course, I mentioned that because many books now, even elementary books, are being written by Muslim Brotherhood operatives, giving our students a distorted version of Islam. So we have lots of problems with education, lots of them. But part of the problem is in the textbook, part of the problem is the teachers that are teaching those courses and the way they've been taught at the university level by radical leftist professors or even Marxist. I tell you a story about FIU. One day when I was living in FIU, a founder of FIU who had been there almost 30 years, a Cuban American woman, she stopped me as I was going to my car. I said, Frank, I have to invite you. We're all going to Cuba. What do you mean we're all going to Cuba? Yeah, everybody here, and all of the Cuban Americans in the FIU were going to Cuba free of charge. We're going to stay at the in Havana at the National Hotel. We're going to go to the Tropicana. We're going to go to Varadero, to the 5-star Meliá Varadero from Spain. And we're going to spend about a week and a half in Cuba. And we all get leave from, you know, they let us go. And then I said to her, but why, who's paying for that trip? Oh, it's a foundation in the United States that's paying for the trip. And why would a foundation want to pay for us to go to Cuba? I asked, no? And then she said, oh, because that foundation wants to establish relations with Cuba, like eventually Obama did. But this was before Obama did that, when she was talking to me. And then I kept pumping her for information. Well, what do we do in Cuba? Well, we're going to meet at the University of Havana with professors. And then what do you think Cuban American professor at FIU did? They inviting all the communist professors to come at FIU to talk to our students. And one of the professors at FIU, Carlos Alvarez, who was a founder of FIU, is in jail today with his wife, Elcita, who is from my hometown of Camagüey, because they were agents of Cuban intelligence. And they are in prison because they were here spying on the United States. And that was a founder of FIU. So just to give you an example how infiltrated our universities are. But anyway, so we have our universities infiltrated, our schools, even middle school and seniors, high schools, infiltrated by these people. Then we have the press that is thoroughly controlled, with the exception of Fox News, with the exception of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post. And by the way, they are owned by News Corporation, by Murdoch, who is a globalist who goes to all the Bilderberg meetings and meet with George Soros. He's the owner of Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. So even those newspapers and Fox News can only go so far. Hannity one time started talking about the New World Order, and he said it's not a conspiracy, it's true. What the New World Order is doing, trying to establish a one world government, we're all going to be slaves. He said it one time and never said it again. Because if he said it another time, he would be fired from Fox News. And when Glenn Beck began saying it, he got fired from Fox News. And he had to go on to Texas and establish his own TV channel. So even Fox News can only go so far because the owner is Murdoch. And Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, Wall Street Journal, and New York Post, went in London to a fundraising for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And his two sons and his daughters-in-law, all of them are Democrats. All of them are. So that's what we're facing. Even Fox News is not totally free. So very few Americans are really aware of this great danger that we're facing with this communist infiltration at all levels, at all different levels. But this book, I mean, this article that I sent you, that I wrote and got it published in a couple of websites, The Communist Plan to Conquer America. I want to talk about this article now, unless they want to ask any questions now before I go on.
Go on, Frank.
Okay. Well, this article that I wrote, I have this picture in the article of this woman born in Vietnam. She came to the United States when she was 5 years old. She's a communist. Her name is Tram Nguyen, Nguyen. She's now a state representative in Massachusetts. But before that, for 12 years, she was the coordinator of a communist front in Virginia called the New Virginia Majority, which was a communist front for a communist organization called the Liberation Road. Where have you heard that in Fox News? No, they don't talk about it. Anyway, so she talks about how they have a plan to destroy the Republican Party in the southern states, and how she did that successfully in Virginia. Virginia used to be a Republican state for many, many years. Now it's completely Democrat. They even have a governor who now does not allow people in Virginia to go to church and who likes infanticide. and want to take away the weapons as well in violation of the amendment of the Constitution. But anyway, this woman said that she worked for 12 years in Virginia. Everybody got paid that worked for her. When I was working in Miami, I had volunteers, got the money. And we were trying to register people, and all the Democrats were on salary trying to register people for the Democratic Party right here in Miami-Dade. When I was head of a Trump Victory Office, one of the three that we had in Miami-Dade, in 2016, where I had 200 volunteers, all of them had no pay. And all the Democrats had offices everywhere, lots of money for them, and so forth. But anyway, so this lady says that she registered in these 12 years with other communists working with her, 300,000 voters. She said that she knocked on 2.5 million doors. She had help from an American that worked at Wuhan University. I wonder if he got infected with the virus. This American communist working in Wuhan University was helping her identify the places where she needed to knock on doors. That's the picture of the American working at Wuhan University with two of the students. His name is Steve McClure. And he was using something called Geographic Information System, GIS technology, to identify low-income minority voters in Virginia, young people, naive young people, low information voters, in order to register them and telling them that if they vote Democratic, they were going to have all kinds of free stuff coming to them. They'll get free colleges, free tuition, free everything, right? And very interesting, in this article, I mentioned that there was a professor in Edinburgh, Scotland, in the 18th century by the name of Alexander Fraser Tyler. And he said something very interesting that I'm going to read to you, because now that they're promising free everything, right? Trillions of dollars, Green New Deal, slave and illegal alien reparations, cancellation of student loans, all of these things that we're going to spend trillions and trillions of dollars besides what we're spending right now in the United States at the moment. Anyway, this Scottish professor said the following: a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. So all of these communists that are working to try to flip all the southern states from Republican to Democrat is only interim. The objective is to establish a communist dictatorship in the United States once they get the Democrats in the White House or in charge of Congress. So anyway, so now they have targeted North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, because these are states. In Florida, we go both ways. Trump won Florida, but also voted twice for Obama and voted for Clinton. So we're like a purple state. And the way they do it is by doing what they did in Virginia, knocking doors. And also another thing that they're doing in these states is all of the former prisoners that did not have the right to vote, they let them vote. In Florida, we have a great danger because they passed with George Soros funds an amendment to the Constitution of Florida 2 years ago that allowed now 1.4 million former felons who were in prison for felonies that are now going to be eligible to vote in the next election. And 800,000 of them are African Americans. We only, Trump won the state by very few votes. DeSantis carried the state by 35,000 votes. and Senator Scott won the state by 10,000 votes. We had a communist running against DeSantis, who now is involved in all kinds of sexual scandals. He was found naked in Miami Beach Hotel with another escort, homosexual escort. And that guy almost got elected governor with a difference of 35,000 votes. So now the George Soros put a lot of money into Florida to pass that amendment allowing these former felons to vote. Now the Republican-dominated legislatures of Florida are trying to stop this. They said that if these felons owe money because they didn't pay the victims' reparations or they didn't pay the court costs, they should not vote. But of course, the federal Democratic judge said that was unconstitutional. Then now that's being appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court, and it might even end up in the Supreme Court before November of 2020. But I can assure you, if they are allowed to vote, Trump has very little chances of winning Florida. And if he loses the 29 electoral votes of Florida, it's very difficult for him to be elected president. They did that in Kentucky. They elected in Kentucky a Democratic governor in this last December. And first thing that he did, through executive action, he allowed all the former prisoners who could not vote in Kentucky that now they can. This is the picture of that governor that did that. That's his picture there. Okay? He's Andy Behart. And by executive order, not even through the legislature of Kentucky, executive order, now 104,000 former prisoners will be able to vote in Kentucky. And they did that also in Virginia. Virginia had a governor very friendly to Bill and Melissa Clinton, Terry McLaughlin. He was governor of Virginia. He also allowed the felons to vote. And of course, he ran the campaign of Bill Clinton and also Hillary Clinton, a very dear friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton. So that's how they flipped Virginia. Now they want to do the same with southern states, which with the exception of Florida that goes both ways, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, all of these states have always voted Republican. So that's how they intend to take over and turn all those states Democratic, elect a Democratic president, and move from there to an outright communist dictatorship. That's a very important article to read. And if you don't have it, perhaps, Mark, you can share that article with those that are listening to us right now. I'll stop here if they have any question on this article before I go to other topics, if anybody wants to talk about this article.
You know, Frank and everybody with us tonight, if you want an article at all, let me know. You can email me at mgriffin@jbs.org. Frank, it might be a good time to ask, what's a good way for people to buy your books?
Very, very easy. You go to Amazon Books, you put my name, Frank DeVarona, and then you see all my books are on sale there, very inexpensive, $25. I can talk about some of my books now if you think it's appropriate.
Sure.
Yeah, I have written 26 books, but I'm gonna just talk about the most important ones of all. The latest book, my most recent book, is this one here. It's about 403 pages long with big letters, big types to make it easy to read and full of pictures, lots of pictures. Anyway, so this book is called Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, the Kennedy assassination, the Vatican, and the New World Order. So I talked about how the globalists of the New World Orders has always interfered in Cuba. In 1902, Cuba received its independence, but it was with limited sovereignty. because Elijah Root, a founder of the Council of Foreign Relations, who was Secretary of War and Secretary of State under two different presidents, he insisted in putting the Platt Amendment in the Cuban Constitution. He got Orville Platt, a friend of his, a senator, who passed that, but he was the one that did it. Elijah Root, one of the founders of the Council of Foreign Relations in 1921. And that amendment gave Cuba limited sovereignty. And the New World Order always interfered in the affairs of Cuba. But the worst interference came during the Eisenhower administration, when Fidel Castro was fighting the dictator Fulgencio Batista in the Sierra Maestras mountains with the help of the Soviet Union, with the help of the US mafia, and with the help of the CIA station chief in Havana. The last ambassador in Cuba under Eisenhower, Earl T. Smith, testified in 1960 to the Senate Intelligence Committee and said that the CIA station chief in Havana was working hard to put Fidel Castro in power in Cuba. He said that in Congress. 3 US ambassadors in Cuba, Earl T. Smith, who served until the end of the Batista regime, sent cable after cable to the State Department of Eisenhower, who had a globalist, John Foster Dulles, as Secretary of State, and his brother, Alan Dulles, another globalist, who was CIA director, both of them named by Dwight D. Eisenhower when he took power in 1953. Both of them were globalists. They worked very closely with the Council of Foreign Relations. One of them was even president for a while of the Council of Foreign Relations. Anyway, so these 3 ambassadors from Cuba, Earl T. Smith, and the one before him, Arthur Gardner, and another one that served in the 1940s, Sproul Braden. These 3 ambassadors sent cable after cable to the State Department when Eisenhower was the president, saying, do not allow the 26th of July movement to take power in Cuba because it's thoroughly infiltrated by communists. You also had Arleigh Burke, Chief of Naval Operations, with Eisenhower and Kennedy, who also sent a cable saying the same thing to the State Department. Arleigh Burke was very clear that Fidel Castro was a communist when he was in the mountains. Then you had a US ambassador in Mexico who also sent a cable to the State Department. So you have 4 US ambassadors, the Chief of Naval Operations, telling the State Department, do not allow Fidel Castro to come to power in Cuba. He's going to be an enemy of the United States, and it's going to be a danger to the hemisphere, and it turns out a danger to the entire world. But they had 2 communists in the State Department. One of them, who in Cuba had a Hispanic name, Guillermo Arturo Montenegro, but he was actually born in the United States with the name of William Wyland. But then his mother married a Venezuelan, and he abandoned his English name and took in Cuba, when he was in Cuba for a while, he took Guillermo Arturo. Well, anyway, with time, he advanced and became head in 1957 of the Caribbean desk. So he was in charge of Mexico, Central America, and all the countries in the Caribbean, including Cuba. He, by the way, was a bisexual. When he was in Cuba, he met Summer Wells, who was a dear friend of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Eventually, Summer Wells becomes deputy of the State Department, number 2 in the State Department. And he had sexual relations with this man in Cuba. So when he brings his lover, he puts him in the State Department. He doesn't even have to do an application. He enters the State Department with no application, just put him there. Eventually, Summer Wells in 1943, when he was number 2 in the State Department, he took a train and had sex with 2 black conductors. Actually, he don't have sex. They tried to have sex with them. That went into the press, and then he was forced to be fired by his best friend, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had a lot of standing spies in his administration and in the State Department as well. Anyway, but this man by the name of William Wyland was in charge of the Cuban desk. His boss, Assistant Secretary of Inter-American Affairs, Roy Robotham, was also a communist. So all of those cables that came in, they just died there. So because the State Department and the globalists in the State Department wanted to put a communist in power in Cuba, and they did it with Fidel Castro. I mentioned that in the book, lots of details on that. I also talk about something totally unknown in the United States, which is the role of Cuba in the Vietnam War. Cuba sent 3 people to torture our pilots who were in jail at what they call the Hanoi Hilton in North Vietnam. And they tortured our pilots really badly. One of them died of the tortures. I even describe what happened to him in the book. It's a horrendous thing to read in my book, how that man suffered. He was a lieutenant commander of the US Navy who was tortured to death in Hanoi by Cubans, torturers. But the worst part is not just that. That man that was torturing them in Hanoi, with time, becomes a general. His name is Vecino Alegret, becomes a general in Cuba, and is also named Minister of Higher Education in Cuba. And the United States gave visas to that man that tortured our pilots in Hanoi so that he can come to Harvard, to MIT, to Stanford, to all of our Ivy League universities. And we gave him visa to a person that was torturing our pilots. Well, the worst part is not even that. I mentioned this in the book. The worst part is that they took 19 US pilots who were in Hanoi to Cuba, to Havana, and there they tortured him so horrendously bad. They were trying to extract secrets about our carriers, about our Air Force, and so forth. But they tortured in Havana so bad, they were so disfigured, they lost their noses, ears, that they could never be released. So when they released the pilots who were in Hanoi, those unfortunate pilots that were in Havana were all assassinated. Where have you seen that in Fox News? Where have you read that in the New York Post or in the Wall Street Journal? It's astounding to me. But of course, people that were there that knew that, they wrote about it, seen by very few people, but I found those articles and I put them in my book. But this, another thing that the Cubans were doing during the Vietnam War, they were flying Russian MiGs, shooting at our aircraft. And in addition to that, Cuba had a brigade patrolling the Ho Chi Minh Trail, killing US soldiers. Where have you read that? Why are we covering that up? Why have Democratic and Republican administration covered the role of Cuba in the Vietnam War? Why have we also covered up the role of Cuban artillery units that were firing from Syria into Israel in the many wars that they had in the Middle East? Why haven't read that in the United States? Oh, because Cuba was always protected by the globalists of the New World Order, beginning by David Rockefeller, who was the best friend Fidel Castro ever had, and who was the most powerful person in the United States until he died at the age of 102. Very powerful, because he, of course, was president of the Council of Foreign Relations. He founded the Bilderberg Group in 1954 with the Rothschilds, with the husband of Queen Juliana, Prince Bernhard, who was a Nazi from World War II, and the monarchs of Europe, all of them are globalists. So David Rockefeller founded the Bilderberg Group, and in 1972, he founded the Trilateral Commission, the most powerful globalists controlling US foreign policy. That is why we lost at the Bay of Pigs. I wrote an article, which I sent you, Mark, in New American Magazine on the Bay of Pigs, on what the globalists did at the Bay of Pigs. This is the issue where that article is found. I wrote that article together with Alex Newman, And the article is like 8 pages long. It's a lot of pages in the magazine. This is the article right here in the New American magazine. The article also has a lot of pictures in here. Herbert Matthews, who went to meet with Fidel Castro in February of 1957. He was probably a Russian spy, globalist, one of the worst globalists. And then he told the American people in the New York Times that Castro was the Simon Bolivar, the George Washington of the Americas. He was going to bring democracy into Cuba. He did that, and thanks to the New York Times, Castro, who was totally unknown in the United States, now became known not only here, but throughout the world as a big hero. That was the New York Times, the new toilet paper New York Times, as Hannity calls it recently. Also in this article, they put the picture, with my picture, with the president, Donald Trump, when he came to the Bay of Pigs Museum, and we endorsed him for the first time. This is my picture in color there in the magazine, where I gave Donald Trump the insignia of the Assault Brigade 2506. Behind that, you see the brigade flag on the back. But anyway, so we had never endorsed a president in our history in all the many years that we had the Bay of Pigs Veteran Association Brigade 2506. Never endorsed the president, but we did endorse Donald Trump because we knew who Hillary Clinton was and how dangerous she was to the United States and how friendly she was with Cuba. So we endorsed the president there. But anyway, so what happened with the Bay of Pigs, as I talked in this article, you don't have to buy the whole book. If you don't want to buy the book, just read that article. But basically, is that the Kennedy administration was full of globalists. The worst one being Dean Rusk, who was Secretary of State under Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. And he had been the president of the Rockefeller Foundation for 10 years. And he did not take orders from Kennedy. He took orders from David Rockefeller. So he was against the Bay of Pigs invasion from the very beginning. And he was one of the persons who did the most to destroy us. Then you had the Bundy brothers, who were professors in Harvard, who welcomed Fidel Castro when he went to Harvard in April of 1959. All of them globalists. You had Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and many other people in the Kennedy administration who were part of the Council of Foreign Relations and other globalist institutions. And the CIA plan approved by the Joint Chief of Staff actually was an excellent plan. And it had a good chance of toppling the mass murdering Castro regime in Cuba back in 1961. We were supposed to invade in the city of Trinidad, which had 27,000 people, most of them anti-communist, and right at the foot of the Escambray Mountains in Cuba, where there were many anti-communist people fighting against the communist regime in Cuba, who could have come down the mountain and joined us as we landed in Trinidad. Trinidad also had piers for our obsolete Liberty ships from World War II, so we could unload all the ammunition and weapons that we had. It also had an airstrip, and in our ships we brought oil and gasoline for the Air Force Brigade of the brigade. We had 16 B-26s, bombers from World War II that could operate right at the Trinidad airport. But more importantly, it had piers, so we could unload that from the obsolete ships that we had. And it also had 2 roads leading to Havana that could have been easily blocked. So we could have established a free Cuba city there, bring our government in exile from Miami, who would then become the government of free Cuba in arms, and then maybe then ask for help from the United States and other Latin American countries. That plan had extremely high success, but that was all changed by the Kennedy administration. Under the recommendation of Dean Rusk and other people that wanted us to lose at the Bay of Pigs, to destroy us and consolidate the communist regime in Cuba. So that high treason occurred. There were 5 air attacks of Cuba before we landed on the 17th of April. The first one on April the 15th, a surprise air attack on all airfields in Cuba using the 16 B-26s of the Air Force of the Brigade 2506 by direct order of President Kennedy. That was reduced to only 8 planes and 3 airfields. So that air attack only destroyed half of the planes of the enemy. It left them with jets, Sea Furies, and B-26s. And then the other air attacks that were going to happen in the afternoon of the 15th, on the 16th, in the morning, in the afternoon, and on D-Day as well. That other attacks was to destroy the refineries in Cuba, so there will be no oil to move the enemy tanks, Stalin tanks that Russia had given, or Soviet Union had given Cuba. So it was a very well-designed plan, approved by the Joint Chief of Staff and by the CIA, and that plan was thrown overboard. And the worst part that angers me even today is that when President Kennedy, in many of the meetings that they had at the White House, always telling Alan Dulles and others, Richard Bissell and others from the CIA, I may cancel this operation. I'm not sure if I want to invade Cuba. And then when they were discussing that, then Alan Dulles told him, Mr. President, you do have a problem if you cancel the invasion. Number one, in 1960, you attacked the Eisenhower-Nixon administration that they were weak on Cuba and they had allowed the establishment of a communist beachhead in the Western Hemisphere. That's how you defeated Nixon in 1960 in the famous debates. That's how you defeated him. And moreover, you have a disposal problem. Disposal to me means garbage. You have a disposal problem, Mr. President, because you have been training 1,500 people in Guatemala, some of them up to a year. And now you're going to tell these people the invasion is canceled? And then you're going to bring them back to the United States? What do you think those 1,500 people are going to say of you? They're going to call you a traitor, a chicken. They're going to denounce you as a weak president because of canceling this operation. And then Kennedy said, you're right. Well, we need to dump them in Cuba. But where did they dump us? At a place where we surely be defeated, the Bay of Pigs. There were no piers there. How could we unload the gasoline from the planes in these obsolete World War II Liberty ships that they gave us? So the Kennedy administration committed high treason, dereliction of duty, and criminal negligence. I mentioned that in the book. But I also have to tell you, in the book, the part that I talk about the Kennedy assassination in that book, Kennedy, and particularly Robert Kennedy, they were humiliated at the defeat of the Bay of Pigs, totally humiliated. And then they changed. And now they said, now we're going to really work with the Bay of Pigs veterans. We were released from prison after being tortured badly for 2 years. We returned to the United States in December of 1962. Then the Kennedy administration, Robert in particular, stopped being Attorney General and began working only with the CIA. The CIA right here in Miami, next to the Miami Zoo, that was where the most CIA agents in the world outside of Langley, Virginia. 300 agents were right here in Miami, working full-time to topple Castro, under President Kennedy, under Robert Kennedy. They gave us money to establish a naval base in Costa Rica. And they were even contemplating a direct invasion of Cuba. And that's why they put the missiles in Cuba to stop Kennedy from invading Cuba. It really had changed. But unfortunately, the CIA was not very well at assassinating Castro. Castro knew that President Kennedy was trying to kill him. As I explained in the part of the book about the Kennedy assassination, Fidel Castro decided to assassinate the president to maybe stop him from being assassinated by President Kennedy. And then you had also rogue agents from the KGB who were also involved in the Kennedy assassination. And then you also had the mafia in the United States. One of the things I mentioned in this book, the best book on the Kennedy administration, I have about 25 in my home, is one written by Howard Hirsch, Hirsch, Seymour Hirsch, I'm sorry, Pulitzer Prize winner, Seymour Hirsch. You can buy that book paperback in Amazon for 85 cents. The best book on the Kennedy administration. It's called The Dark Side of Camelot. Seymour Hirsch, Pulitzer Prize winner. That was a Jew, and he also worked for the New York Times. How objective can you be? And then he talks about how Joseph Kennedy, who had ties with the mafia, met with Sam Giancana, the head of the mafia in Chicago, in the courthouse of a federal judge. That's what Chicago is, so corrupt. So you have Joseph Kennedy meeting in 1959 in the office of a federal judge in Chicago, Sam Giancana, head of the mafia in Chicago. And then Joseph told Sam Giancana, you need to help my son be elected president. Once you elect him, the mafia, nothing will happen to the mafia as long as my boy is president, and you into fear. So then the mafia cheated in that 1960 election. Richard Nixon won the election. The mafia cheated everywhere. In West Virginia in 1959, Hubert Humphrey was going to win the primary of West Virginia. So you had Robert Kennedy, you had his brother, the late senator from Massachusetts. They descended upon Virginia and they gave every sheriff in West Virginia $50,000, 1959, probably $5 million to today's prices. And the sheriffs control the elections in West Virginia, and they hated Catholics in West Virginia, but when they bought the sheriffs, that's how they defeated Hubert Humphrey. But they cheated in Texas, they cheated in Illinois, they cheated everywhere. That election was won by Kennedy by 119,000 popular votes, but they cheated everywhere. So the mafia thought that they had it done. I mean, we have elected the son of a mafia guy, Joseph Kennedy. He's our friend. But then John Kennedy appoints Robert Kennedy Attorney General. And the very mafia leaders, Sam Giancana, Santos Traficante, mafia leader from Florida, Carlos Marcelo, mafia leader from Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Rosselli from Las Vegas, the Teamster Union, Jimmy Hoffa, all of those people cheated. Now Robert Kennedy, the people that put his brother in power, cheating in that election that Nixon won, except for the cheating. Now Robert Kennedy is putting those people in prison. So now you have the FBI recording. So all of these people saying, we're going to assassinate the president. We're going to kill Robert Kennedy. They are betraying us. We put them in power and they're putting us in jail. I mean, so it was very clearly that the mafia was involved in the Kennedy assassination. The mafia had deep ties with Fidel Castro when he was in the mountains and continued to have those ties forever with Fidel Castro. For example, the person that assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald, who by the way was a KGB agent, and he actually shot not the president, he injured Governor Cullen in Texas badly. The ones that assassinated President Kennedy were 3 Cubans that were in the grassy knoll who shot him from the head, from the front. Those were the shots that actually killed the president. Blew his head, and even Jackie Kennedy got part of the husband brain in her dress. The horrendous things happened there. So you have 3 Cubans in Dallas the day that the president was assassinated. They were there with orders of Fidel Castro to assassinate the president. They were also working with the mafia. And the Jack Ruby, who is forced to kill Lee Harvey Oswald so he won't talk, he was working for Cuban intelligence since 1959, going to Cuba, meeting with Cuban intelligence. And he stole from the United States state-of-the-art surveillance equipment and gave that to Fidel Castro, who then Fidel Castro had in 1959 state-of-the-art surveillance equipment like the ones we had in the United States in 1959. And then Fidel Castro sold that state-of-the-art surveillance equipment from the United States to the Soviet Union for money. This is why Fidel Castro was so effectively in destroying the internal opposition in Cuba, because he had the the means to do it. But anyway, so that's part of what I talk about, the Kennedy assassination, which was basically done by the US mafia in revenge for the betrayal of Kennedy, since they put him in power, and by rogue agents of the KGB, and also by Fidel Castro. Also, Kennedy mentioned two things that may have cost his life as well. He said that before he left the presidency, he was going to expose all the secret societies that were so harmful to the nation. He must have been talking about the Council of Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, Skull and Bones, and so forth. He also said that he wanted to back the dollars with silver from the US Treasury. That was against the banking cartel that stole the United States on December 23rd, 1913, and created the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not a bank, it's a banking cartel that prints money out of thin air. Right now, this is a banking cartel, the Federal Reserve. Where is a group of bankers? Where do they have the money to spend $3 or $4 trillion right now helping banks? They've been printing money out of thin air for years. And who did that? That's a chapter here in my book on the New World Order. They did it in Jekyll Island. One of the best books that you can read on that, a 600-page book, is called The Creature of Jekyll Island. It tells you how they stole the United States back then, when Woodrow Wilson was president, in violation of the US Constitution. The US Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 says, Congress shall print the currency and determine the value thereof. So how can you take that power of Congress in the US Constitution and give that to a banking cartels made up of the Rothschilds from Europe, the Warburgs from Europe, Kuhn and Lowen from the United States and Europe, the Rockefeller and Morgan. That's what happened in 1913. They stole the United States. They gave us the income tax, and they've been printing money in thin air ever since. So that's a very important chapter in this book. And I told you, in my book on the New World Order, I used 29 books to write it, and each of those 29 books with their covers are featured in my book. So when I talk about the Federal Reserve, I talk about the best book written on the Federal Reserve called The Creature of Jekyll Island. I talk about the end of the Fed and other books like that, paragraphs or 1 or 2 pages of what those books are saying, as I talk 20 pages about what the Federal Reserve is all about. So anyway, so that's the story of this book here. And I want to talk a little bit about the Vatican, unless I have some questions before I get to the Vatican.
Frank, why don't you give us about 10 more minutes on the Vatican? I'd like to hear that too. And then we'll maybe open up for some questions after that for about 20 minutes. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
The Vatican right now, with the Marxist Pope that we have, he's a globalist of the New World Order. He was a keynote speaker when the United Nations unveiled Agenda 2030, which is even worse than Agenda 21. And he is very active right now. He has blamed this virus, the Wuhan virus, not on China, on Mother Nature. It's revenge because we're messing up with the environment. So because of the damage that we're doing to the earth is because we have this virus. But anyway, this is a very important chapter in this book. And also in the article that I sent you here as well, called Are Globalists Using Coronavirus as Battering Ram to Destroy and Remake the World Order? You can also share that with your friends in the Young Society. But talking about the Vatican, Benedict XVI, and by the way, I want to mention this before I say something about the Vatican. I am a practicing Catholic. I take communion, not now that I can leave my house, but with my wife, we take communion every Sunday in churches in Miami, Catholic churches. I'm related to an anti-communist cardinal that we had in Cuba by the name of Cardinal Arteaga. He was a cousin of my grandmother. I'm related to a Franciscan priest who is in Cuba today in a church, and to his sister who is a nun in Virginia. So I have ties to religious figures in the Catholic Church. But I have to denounce this Pope. He's a devil in the Vatican. Okay, he, first of all, how did he get elected Pope? First of all, we hadn't had in many centuries any Pope renouncing to be Pope. So how did they get rid of Benedict XVI, who is very much alive, who just recently said now at the Guardian, in the London Guardian newspaper, that he's trying to be silenced in the Vatican at this very moment. He just said that 2 days ago. So Benedict XVI was a conservative Pope. He was an anti-communist Pope, just like the previous Polish Pope, John Paul II, the Polish Pope that we had, anti-communist. So how did they get rid of him? Well, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, George Soros, and bishops and cardinals from Europe who call themselves the Mafia of St. Gallen. St. Gallen is a small city next to Zurich, Switzerland. And these traitors to the church would meet there every summer at St. Gallen. They call each other the Mafia of St. Gallen, conspiring to overthrow Pope Benedict XVI together with the other people that I just mentioned. And how did they do it? By squeezing the Vatican, the finances of the Vatican, that the United States did that with Barack Obama, forcing this conservative Pope to quit against his will. It was a coup d'etat done to the Vatican. The most serious scandal, I guess, in the church history that I ever seen. And then, of course, this Pope, when he comes to power, first thing he does is he's a supporter of the Marxist Catholic theology of liberation, founded by Nikita Khrushchev in 1959 at the Lublanka building, the KGB building in Moscow. At the time, Latin America was 90% Catholic. It's no longer so, but it was then. So they decided to infiltrate communism in Latin America through the Catholic Church. So they create, in the KGB, they create the Catholic theology of liberation, of which the Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Cardinal Bishop of Buenos Aires, is now Pope Francis, Papa Francisco in Spanish. All right, so he becomes the Pope. First thing he does, he meets in the Vatican with all of the main communists of Latin America, where they have created a group called Movimientos Populares, popular movements. He meets with the people, the president of Bolivia, who finally was overthrown, Morales, Evo Morales, and all of the important communists of Brazil, Venezuela, all of these people meet with him in the Vatican. And he says, I want to work with you. And every speech he gave was an anti-capitalist speech, socialism, communism, criticizing free market economy and capitalism. That is the only system that have brought millions of people out of poverty in the world. So he is working with the communists. The following year, he goes to Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia, where he gets this is so horrible, a cross of Jesus, and underneath the cross is a hammer and a sickle. And that cross was designed by a communist Jesuit who is buried in Bolivia because he was attempting to overthrow the government of Bolivia to establish communism. Luis Espinel is that a Jesuit. And then the Pope goes and prays at the tomb of this communist Jesuit priest, as communist as he is, and he said, they killed you because you love the poor. And then he accepts this sacrilegious cross. I have the picture in the book here. I probably cannot find it now. And he takes that back to the Vatican, a sacrilegious cross. And then when he gets to the Vatican, somebody asked and said, Pope Francis, why are you bringing that cross with a hammer and a sickle. Isn't that a sacrilegious object? No, 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 no. That's just art of protest. That's just what it is, art of protest. It has no meaning. So he brings that to the Vatican. So there, when he's in Bolivia, a year after his Pope, he says to all the communists in Latin America, sitting next to Evo Morales, who has a jacket with the picture of Che Guevara, and the Pope is next to him, and then he tells all the communists, I share the same faith as you do, the revolutionary faith. So we have a communist. And now, by now, he has named like 67 cardinals in the College of Cardinals that are as communist as he is. So when he dies and goes to hell and meets Fidel Castro, Mussolini, and Hitler, the Vatican is still going to elect another communist pope. So we, the Catholics, have to forget the Vatican. We, the parishioners, are the Catholic Church. I'm not going to abandon my church. Many have, because they are so upset at what the Vatican is doing. But I will never abandon the Catholic Church. I work with Cuban priests who are, they can't believe what's going on in the Vatican because they're anti-communist. And they're in Miami here. They can't believe what's going on in the Vatican because they're anti-communist Catholic priests right here. I even told we have an archbishop in Miami, and I met with him. He didn't want to hear what I had to tell him because he likes Barack Obama. He likes Hillary Clinton, and he even has a home in Cienfuegos, Cuba, that they probably stole it from a Cuban owner and gave it to him. He goes to Cuba all the time, brings cigars from Cuba, and he's the Archbishop of Miami, Palm Beach, Broward County, Miami-Dade, and the Keys, Archbishop Wensky. And I told him everything of the mafias, everything I told you, I told him. He listened, never denied what I was saying, was totally silent. He was maybe shocked that I knew so much about the Vatican. I talked to him 45 minutes without stopping, and I felt so good I could have told him everything that I'm telling you now, because of course he likes Fidel Castro. He goes to Cuba all the time, or Raúl Castro now. But anyway, so that's the part of the Vatican. The Vatican is very involved now, working with George Soros, working with another trader that we have, Bill Gates, all of these people that want to restructure the economy. They are hoping that the United States will go broke with this virus that they have introduced. They are hoping to defeat Donald Trump, and they are getting ready to restructure the economy of the world. Bill Gates has said, we will never be back to normal. Joe Biden said something similar to that, because they're hoping that if we are unable to elect Donald Trump president, and we have a Democratic socialist in the White House, that they will then, the New World Order will win, we'll all become slaves of the United Nations, which is controlled by, not by the bureaucrats of the United Nations, but all these globalists in these different groups that I mentioned, Council of Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones, and so forth. So I'll stop now here, Mark, for questions or comments.
You know, we have a Zoom group chat that people can ask questions, Frank. And I do have one question. The New American issue you were referencing about Cuba with the different pictures, do you know the date that was?
I do. I have to switch my glasses because I have glasses for TV and glasses for reading. Okay. All right, the issue is June 18th, 2018. June 18th, I have discovered about all these kids having orgies in at the universities.
Okay.
Because our culture has changed for the worse as well. And it's an 8-page article, but I also send you that article as well. So if they cannot find this magazine, again, I'll say the date. It's June 18th, 2018. If they cannot find it, you have my article, or they can put in quotes Alex Newman and Frank DeVarona and New American Magazine, and they probably go straight to that if they do it that way.
Right, and if anyone does want some of those articles Frank has been mentioning, please send me an email, and I will make sure you get them. we are sent out quite a few emails, Frank. So anybody that wants it tonight, let me know. And the best way to get your book, Frank, again, is to just get on Amazon.com, right?
Yes, if you go to the internet and you write Amazon books, they take you there, don't think at the top, and then you put my name there, Frank DeVarona, DeVarona. You'll get to the page where I have all my books there. I sell them very inexpensive, $25, even though they're thick books like this. That takes me about a year to write, but I want people to buy it, so I don't put $40, $45. Very inexpensive. And you see all my books there. I mentioned this one here. I have another book called The New World Order, Threatens America and the World, which I was talking about to the Miami group before your group came on board. And I talked about from the Illuminatis to now, all of the things what the New World Order is. And the cover here is the bank, the central bank of 60 central banks of the world, which is in Basel, Switzerland. My wife took that picture when we spent a couple of days in Basel, and that is the bank that rules the world. The Federal Reserve is one of the 60 central banks that are in the central bank of the world. And they meet there like diplomats. This is the bank that created the euro. This is the bank that told the Europeans, let's establish a European currency, so all of us are going to be richer. And what they were doing was taking the sovereignty away of those 28 nations that signed up to the European Union. They never told them they had nothing to do with the economy, had to do with stealing their sovereignty away and on their way to a new world order. But anyway, so this is the book, $25. I also have another book that I mentioned before your group came on board, Trump's America Under Siege. I have a very important chapter there, chapter 33 of the book, where I talk about something horrendous that Barack Obama did when he was president. It's chapter 33 of this book. And I'm saying there, Trump needs to declassify Presidential Directive 11. That is something that Barack Obama did when he was president. It's secret, but it has been partially filtered, not totally, partially filtered by investigative reporters of the First Order. And what he said in that Presidential Directive 11 was that Barack Obama, the US foreign policy, was going to be to turn the entire Middle East to Iran. That's why you had the Iranian deal. And the entire north of Africa to Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. And then we proceeded to overthrow the president of Egypt, Mubarak, who was a loyal ally of the United States for 36 years, and to put in power Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. That was done by Barack Obama. They also intervened in Yemen. They intervened in many countries in the Middle East, in Syria, and so forth. And of course, I sent this book to the White House. I have given this book to Governor DeSantis. I've given the book to Senator Scott. I've asked those two people to have direct access to the president every day if they want to, and asked them to tell the president to declassify that vile document, that treasonous document done by Barack Obama, because if he does that, the whole world would know that we had a traitor in the White House for 8 years, and another traitor, Hillary Clinton, Uma Badin, Samantha Powers, and others in the White House that implemented this policy of overthrowing secular dictators and substituting them for, obviously, for modern brotherhood operative dictators. You got a good example when we went to war against Gaddafi. Gaddafi was an evil man, very evil. He shot down our plane over Scotland, killing Americans. He would kill our soldiers in Germany, putting bombs when they went to drink German beer at bars. And then our president, Ronald Reagan, got tired. He sent our planes from England, bombed the palace of Gaddafi to kill Gaddafi, did not kill him, but destroy the palace and kill some of Gaddafi's children. And after that, Gaddafi stopped attacking the United States. He made peace with the United States. Under George W. Bush, he turned in all the weapons of mass destruction that he was creating, and then he became an ally of the United States in the war of terror. So Barack Obama, the Muslim Brotherhood of Libya, Ansar al-Sharia, Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, those were the people that tried to overthrow Gaddafi, and we supported those people. The United States did support those people, and Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton did that, committing high treason, dereliction of duty, and criminal negligence. So that's what Barack Obama has done, a traitor. And I was hoping that Trump would declassify that document. I even talked to Cory Lewandowski, who was the campaign manager of Donald Trump, good friend of Donald Trump, speaks to him all the time. And he spoke in Miami at the Trump Doral in front of 300 people, and then he took questions from the audience. I ran in there first, number one. I said, Cory, why is it that Donald Trump has not declassified Presidential Directive 11? And then he answered me in front of 300 people. He said, I have asked the president dozens of times to declassify that document. If he does that, he destroys the deep state, puts in jail Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Umar Badin, Samantha Power, but he hasn't done it. So you have to ask why. Why has he not done it? When he can just simply declassify this document. Let everybody know what happened, what he wrote, when he was president of the United States. So you have to ask yourself, why has Donald Trump not been able to declassify it? Let us remember something called the Clinton body bags, and maybe threats that he received, or his children that could die. So I'm just speculating. I have no idea why he hasn't done it. If I were him, I would do it today.
Frank, from everyone who's been with you tonight, I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. We have a book that was written about China, but I think one could be well done on Cuba. The one in China that I'm thinking of, that book is called May God Forgive Us. And
yes.
I think it could well have been written on Cuba as well. I'm so grateful you joined us tonight. Can I ask you one question in joining, or in ending here? I don't have any, I've got several kudos. People find you're very amazing. And I would agree with somebody here who said it's better than any movie. Frank, you're riveting. The question would be this: what can people who are watching do to help stop this from happening in our country?
That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that question. Number one, expose them. Let everybody know who these people are, what they're doing now with the Wuhan virus to destroy the United States. Everybody listening here has a sphere of influence. You have friends, you have children, you have grandchildren. You are working in zombie society. Expose these people. Expose, tell them who they are. Number two, write to your congressman, whoever your congressman is, your senators is, so that they support the bill that we have in Congress to abolish the United Nations. We need to withdraw from the United Nations. It is a club of third world dictators, anti-American, anti-West, anti-Israel. We need to expel them from our territory. Let them take them to Geneva. We don't need to have them here. Now, I know Donald Trump has withdrawn from the UNESCO. He's cutting funds from the World Health Organization and in general the United Nations, but he needs to do much more than that. He needs to abandon the United Nations. And that's one thing that we need to all work with. Whoever influence you have, write letters to your congressmen, your senators, whoever you think might help that bill, who's sitting right now in the House of Representatives Foreign Relations Committee, and that's not leaving out of the committee. We need to get rid of the UN and expose these people, denounce them. We can win. Not everything is lost. We can denounce these people, and we should denounce them every day. That's all I do here in Miami. I spend all my time, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, writing articles, speaking all over the United States. I had a meeting just like this one here with one of your colleagues, Evan Mulch, who is the field coordinator of North and South Carolina and Georgia. And I've spoken in national conferences in different places. And that's what we need to do. Denounce these people. We can fight it. We can win, and pray to God every day that we are successful.
Thank you so very much, Frank. I'm going to finally let you go after having such an extended conversation with you. Would you come back on Zoom with us sometime?
Anytime you invite me, I'm
All right.
available.
All right. Frank DeVarona, thank you so much. You're a true patriot. We're so happy to have you here. I'm going to end. I've got one more question flashing at me. See if I can get it answered quickly here. Nope. Nope, I can't find it now. So I'm going to
Well, before I go, I want to thank you, Mark, for inviting me. It was an honor to speak to you. 20 years working in the Young Beer Society, and everybody that is listening to us. I see there were like about 45 participants, maybe more on the phone. But anyway, I'm deeply honored that you invited me. You can invite me anytime. We cannot be pessimistic. We have to be optimistic. We have to fight this. We can win it. We don't have to be slaves of the New World Order.
Exactly. And I wanted to correct something you said right at the beginning, Frank. You were giving me too much credit, and I'd have to credit my wife, Sally, who has been watching for a little while, but without her, I couldn't do this. So I want to thank all of you for coming. If you have any questions that we didn't get to, email me. I'll get them to Frank. If you're the book or some of those articles, again, email me. I'll get back to you with the articles. Thank you all so much for coming. Frank, God bless. We'll talk again.
God bless America.
God bless you all. Thank you.
For anyone listening, check out Compassion International.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, good work. And yeah, Lord help America.